Bishop Lamore Whitehead has been sentenced to 9 years in prison, but you have to watch till the end of the video to understand exactly why. Now, Bishop Lamore Whitehead, or otherwise known as Miller Whitehead, was arrested on federal charges which are incredibly serious, and as a result of his conviction, he'll have to spend a lot of time in prison. Now, the charges range from wire fraud, extortion, to other illustrious crimes. But if you actually read what he was accused of, it underlines the fact that why do people trust those simply because they call themselves pastors, priests, or men of the cloth? The Guardian even had an article in which it stated that Brooklyn's bling bishop, quote unquote, Lamore Whitehead, was accused of defrauding even a member of his own congregation, an elderly woman who lost her life savings, and her name was Pauline Anderson, who is incredibly old, gave him $90,000 he said he would use to renovate her house, but instead he bought a BMW, Louis Vuitton, and other things. What people don't understand is that if you try and commit a crime and you use instruments of interstate commerce, now that's legalese for basically anything in which you can communicate with people over a long distance, such as the internet, phone, etc. What you're doing when you try to defraud a person in that instance is you are transmitting the crime from the state authorities to the federal authorities, because once a crime crosses state lines, typically it's going to be a federal charge. And the difficulty with that for a defendant is that once you're in federal court, your chances of winning a criminal trial go down substantially, because the federal authorities have a 99% conviction rate. Now, for those who don't know who Bishop Lamore Whitehead is, he's a person who had an altercation with D.L. Hughley before a big disagreement with him, an individual who has actually gotten into fistfights inside his church. In his church hall, he has actually been in fights. And if that was not bad enough, he's also been robbed inside church too, with men who brought, for the YouTube algorithm, let's just call it, brought some steel, if you know what I mean, to his church service and made him give up a lot of his personal items, which from the looks of this particular trial would have probably been ill-gotten gains anyway. But that's another story entirely. So ultimately, the moral of this story is that people have to be very careful who they place their faith in, what they believe. It's very different from having faith and reading the book to trusting a man who calls himself the arbiter of virtue, or tries to pretend that he is of higher esteem than his conduct would indicate. So if you actually look at the indictment which was filed by the federal authorities, count 1 was wire fraud, count 2 was attempted wire fraud, 3 was attempted extortion. He's also been accused of making false statements, and in addition to that, the prosecution, the authorities also wanted him to forfeit a lot of assets, so he'd have to give away those ill-gotten gains. People don't understand how serious the federal authorities are and how tough they are. Once you're messing with the feds, you are going to be sweating bullets up until trial. And I'm sure that P. Diddy and other people who have to deal with them feel the same way. But the best thing to do in a situation like this is, guess what? Like, comment, and subscribe.